All right, good afternoon. This is the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District Planning and Natural Resources Committee meeting. It's Tuesday, October 11th at 1 o'clock. May we have the roll call, please?
Director Riffle,
Here.
Director Kishimoto,
Here.
Director Siemens.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to the adoption of the agenda, I'd like to go ahead and read to everyone about the procedures we're going to be using for our hybrid meeting. This meeting is being held in accordance with a recent amendment to the Brown Act through legislation known as AB 361, which allows teleconference meetings during proclaimed emergencies. We're doing our best to conduct hybrid meetings where everyone has an opportunity to listen to the meeting and to provide comment. The meeting agenda explains how members of the public can provide comments at this meeting. The public may provide oral comments in person, through the internet, or via telephone during the meeting. Members of the public who wish to comment during the meeting should submit the public comment form, which is available in the boardroom if you're in person, or on the district website if you're attending remotely. Written comments may also be submitted. They will be distributed to the board of directors and appropriate staff, but they will not be read into the record. Let's start by briefly describing the process for today's meeting. Board members and district staff who are not attending the meeting in person will be participating in the Zoom online meeting as panelists to have the ability to mute and unmute themselves and interact among each other. Members of the public may be present at the district's boardroom or via Zoom. Members of the public attending via Zoom may be able to hear and see all presentations, but they will not be able to unmute themselves or share their screens. During the public comment period, the district clerk will call on members of the public individually who have submitted a public comment form online or in person. Commenters will be allowed to address the board for up to 3 minutes. Video of guests is turned off in Zoom. This will help the meeting run without interruption. Board members and staff, please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking in order to minimize background noise. I will be asking for board member questions and comments by calling on individual board members. This will help us prevent talking over each other. I'd like to remind all staff members to announce their names and titles when speaking to ensure the public and the board know who is speaking. Thank you. Okay, with that, may I have an adoption of the agenda?
So move.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Seaman and a second by Director Kishimoto. We have a roll call. Well, let's see, roll call vote, please, I guess. Yeah,
Director Siemens,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
Director Riffle.
yes,
Motion passes 3-0.
great, thank you. Okay, so Director Siemens, if you see us jump when you comment, that's because you're a little bit loud coming here. So we always jump when you comment, but especially now. Oral communications. Are there any comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda?
Director Riffle, we did not have any requests to provide oral comments for oral communications portion of the agenda.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any here. So thanks. We will close public comment and move on to item number 1. Approve the August 2nd, 2022 Planning and Natural Resources Committee meeting minutes.
Move to adopt the minutes.
All second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Maybe a roll call vote, please.
Director Siemens,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
Director Riffle.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Right. Okay. On to item number 2, Parsippany to the Sea Trail and Parking Area Feasibility Study, Trail Alignment Options, and Parking Area Conceptual Design Alternatives. Here we have the staff report, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Gretchen Louston, Senior Planner. Today, staff are presenting the Parsippany to the Sea Trail and Parking Area Project. The presentation team also includes Brian Apple, Capital Projects Field Manager, Tyler Smith, Planner 2, and Mark Brandy from SWCA Environmental Consultants. The general manager's recommendations are to receive a presentation on the Parissima to the Sea Trail and Parking Area Feasibility Study, and provide feedback on the trail alignment options and parking area conceptual design alternatives, and to consider accepting the general manager's recommended trail alignment 1 and connectors A and B, and the conceptual parking area design alternative C, and forward the recommendation to the board of directors for consideration as the project scope that would serve as the proposed project description to initiate the environmental review under CEQA. An outline of today's presentation is shown here. The project team will be presenting both on trail alignment options and conceptual parking area design alternatives. And we will take questions from the board after each of these sections. The Parissima to the Sea project was identified as a priority of the community during the vision plan process and the subsequent Measure AA bond measure. The MAA bond language specifically includes the Parissima to the Sea trail and parking area, as well as natural resource protection and land management activities within the preserve. Beyond the MAA funds dedicated to completing this suite of projects, staff have worked to leverage additional outside funding, and the district has been awarded approximately $325,000 from the State Coastal Conservancy to support the Parissima to the Sea feasibility study. So before we move ahead with the project presentation, I want to highlight the other ongoing projects within Parissima. While the Parissima to the Sea project is focused on providing ecologically sensitive public access, various other projects focusing on resource enhancement and land management are underway. These projects include the Parissima to the Sea Habitat Enhancement and Water Supply Improvement Plan, Parissima Uplands Site Cleanup and Soil Remediation, Irish Ridge Restoration, Lobetus Creek Restoration and Cattle Fencing. We also are working on some program projects here as well, the Marbled Murrelet Recovery Planning, Badger and Burrowing Owl Habitat Assessment, as well as the District Wildlife Camera Program. And there are also 2 ongoing additional planning projects going on within the preserve. And those are the preserve-wide Parissima Multimodal Access Study. And that was presented to the PNR committee in August, and also the Parissima Multi-Use Trail Crossing and Parking Area Feasibility Study at the Northridge parking lot. The Parissima to the Sea Trail is envisioned to be a roughly 15-mile regional trail connecting Parissima Creek Redwoods to the San Mateo County coast. This trail would create a critical east-west link in the regional trail network from the Bay Area Ridge Trail to the California Coastal Trail, and would ultimately become a significant portion of the Bay to Sea Trail, which is currently being studied by POST and will encompass 40 miles of continuous east-west regional trail connecting the San Francisco Bay to the ocean. The purpose of the Parissima to the Sea feasibility study is to evaluate the potential for a new trail connection, parking area, and trailhead. The project will also analyze opportunities for connector trails and roadway crossings of Verde Road and Highway 1 to connect to the Cowell Parissima parking area. The study area for the Parissima to the Sea trail connection, which is about 5 miles south of downtown Half Moon Bay in unincorporated San Mateo County, is shown here with the purple arrow. The Bay Area Ridge Trail alignment is shown in peach along Highway 35, and the coastal trail is shown in orange. The yellow line shows the existing trails within Parissima that may become part of the Parissima to the Sea Trail. And the parking study area, which includes 2 potential locations close to the Highway 1 and Verde Road intersection, is shown here with the purple P. This graphic shows the project phases and timeline. The Parissima to the Sea project is a multi-year project, and we are working to complete phase 1, the feasibility study, this fiscal year. Following the feasibility study, the district will conduct an environmental review of the proposed project, followed by design development, permitting, and construction. The work associated with the feasibility study includes site analysis, including field investigations and technical studies, and the development of an opportunities and constraints analysis. In December of last year, the project team presented these initial findings at a combined board meeting and public workshop. Since then, trail alignment options have been identified and conceptual parking area design alternatives have been developed, and those will be presented today. The planning study also includes significant public outreach and stakeholder engagement throughout the planning process. And with that, I will pass it over to Brian Apple to present the trail planning process and trail alignment options.
Great, thank you, Gretchen. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Brian Apple, Capital Projects Field Manager in our Land and Facilities Department. And I'll talk today about the trail planning process that we've gone through. So typically for our trail planning efforts, we work very closely with our in-house trail construction crew. And so for this particular project, we worked with our Skyline field office staff to conduct this analysis. So the image you see here on the screen shows all of the data collection that was done as part of the trail layout and analysis. So our typical process involves initially a desktop and LiDAR review. We collect topographic maps from USGS, and we look at that level to identify initial opportunities and constraints. The next step is to get out in the field and assess the conditions on the ground, identify control points that constrain the trail, look at how we connect our existing trail network to our desired parking area. Then we conduct our full-blown trail scouting, and we conduct this effort by using our crew in the field. And we basically started this effort in winter of 2020, and we spent the majority of the winter of 2020, 2021, evaluating the site and scouting. We have the benefit of using tools developed by our GIS department to collect data in the field, sync it to our eGIS system, and have our data basically real time, where we can incorporate that data, analyze it back in the office, and then continue our scouting effort. And again, you can kind of see all the data that was collected through this trail scouting effort. After we've collected that data and conducted that initial trail scouting, we then determine our feasible alignments. And when we're looking at what a feasible alignment is, we're looking at, is it feasible to construct from a construction standpoint? Does it cross sensitive habitats such as riparian areas, water crossings, unstable landscape as well, like underlying geological conditions? And in this particular site, we do have conservation grazing tenants. And so that's something else we're also being cognizant of when we're laying out these trails, is try to minimize impacts on the grazing tenants operation. So in addition, we also meet on site with our grazing tenant to talk about their interests in the project, how we can help lay out a trail to minimize impacts on the grazing tenant. Once we have what we consider feasible alignments, we've worked with our consultant SWCA and our in-house natural resources department to look at both biological and cultural resources. So we have conducted reconnaissance level resource evaluations of the site, identifying key sensitive habitats to attempt to avoid and minimize impacts to those sensitive habitats. Additionally, through our scouting process, we identify areas that are of particular concern, that are kind of key components of the project, and we conduct sort of site-specific feasibility studies. So a good example of this is the crossing of Labidos Creek. We need to ensure that there's a feasible crossing location, and so we engage a consultant to evaluate that site to determine whether it truly is a feasible connection and have that professional opinion. And so based on all of that scouting that we've conducted, we've identified the trail alternatives that are shown here. Again, what we're working to do is to connect the existing Irish Ridge trail, which is shown here, this connection with our existing trail network, all the way down to our proposed parking area on Verde Road. What we've identified is one feasible alignment shown in gold here that runs from Irish Ridge down to Levitos Creek, crosses Levitos Creek, and runs along the riparian edge of Levitos Creek, and then connects to this point where we have identified 3 different alternatives for the trail alignment. Now, our preferred trail alignment is shown with this kind of halo effect on this purple segment and this gold segment here. So alignment number 1, which is again our preferred trail alignment. We've identified this as our preferred trail alignment because it avoids the pasture land for the grazing tenant as much as feasibly possible. It also provides for a purpose-built trail experience for the users. So something we would construct in the 4 to 6 foot range. That would be, from a lot of feedback we've heard, is a very kind of positive trail user experience. It avoids drainage crossings as much as possible, and it avoids a lot of sensitive habitat as well by being placed along the edge of the pasture and the chaparral and coast sage scrub communities. The other alignment we looked at was this alignment number 2, shown in red. This follows basically the existing ranch road for the South Cowell property and beyond. And this is a much wider trail experience. It's anywhere from 10 to 12 feet wide. It's fairly steep, kind of coming out of the parking area, and climbs along the ridge line. And all 3 of these options actually provide great views from the area. There's stunning views out to the Farallon Islands, Purisima Creek drainage, Levitos Creek drainage. So they all offer really great views, from a user experience. However, this red alignment does bisect right through the kind of the core of the grazing area, and then again provides sort of a wider trail, which may not be as desirable from some user groups' perspective. It also tends to be steeper than a purpose-built trail would be. Grades in excess of about 18%, so fairly steep in some sections. We also looked at this alignment number 3, shown here, which again would be additional purpose-built trail. And this is a feasible alternative from a construction standpoint. However, the switchbacks that you can see in this area could potentially be visible from Highway 1. So providing something that's not as desirable, being able to see the cut on the hillside from Highway 1. Additionally, it runs right through a lot of the pasture area and in close proximity to stock ponds. The stock ponds provide potential habitat for red-legged frog. The pasture area is commonly used by badgers as well in this area. So not necessarily ideal from a trail layout perspective. Also, the cattle would impact the trail surface, which would increase operation and maintenance in this area, and then also would result in higher frequency of cattle user interactions if this were to be implemented. So again, what we're considering is, our preferred trail alignment is alignment number 1 here, shown in purple, and extending along this gold segment all the way up to Irish Ridge. We also looked at some connector pieces to link to the post trail easement, which is shown here. And once the preferred trail alignment is confirmed, staff will complete additional technical studies of this post trail easement here area so that we can develop conceptual plans for connector trails and roadway crossings. So that's once the alignment would be preferred. And so we looked at these 2 options, basically A, which would climb up above from the parking lot, provide good views, and then drop down to the post trail easement. So this would use a portion of the existing ranch road. And then B, which runs along Verde Road. And from what we've heard from our visitor service staff and some of our previous stakeholder engagement meetings, is concerned that if the parking lot's here and people want to access the post trail easement, they may actually use the road because it's the shortest link from A to B basically. So and when we're looking at option B, there is the South Cowell residence shown here. You can kind of see that in holding there. Staff is evaluating the potential of purchasing this residential parcel from Post. And then this would be brought to the board at a later date. And really, because the trail would need to cross this parcel's driveway, it's likely that we would only implement connector B if the district acquires the South Cowell residence. So again, we're looking at implementing both of these to provide a loop A and B potentially, and then alignment number 1 linking to this gold alignment here as our preferred trail alignment. As I mentioned, and as Gretchen mentioned, we've conducted quite a bit of stakeholder engagement, and we're very fortunate to have a really excellent GIS team that we work with. And so as part of our stakeholder engagement and collaboration with GIS, we developed, our GIS team developed a Trail Viewer app that's really helped us to be able to show the various angles of our trail alignments, why we've identified the particular trail alignments, what kind of opportunities and constraints that we have encountered, and how we've kind of addressed those considerations through our trail layout options. And just looking at sort of a trail comparison, sort of our opportunities and constraints, alignment 1, again, being the alignment shown in purple, linking to that gold alignment. The opportunity is it's a new purpose-built trail, again, sort of that 4 to 6 foot wide range. It really attempts to minimize interaction with the grazing operation. This again was the feedback we heard from the grazing tenant during our initial engagement with the tenants. And it offers great views. As I mentioned, all 3 alignments really do offer great views. Some of the constraints, there's higher construction costs because we are building new trail rather than repurposing existing ranch road. And inevitably, when you're cutting new trail, it's typically more impactful than reusing existing road. Alignment number 2, this was again using the existing ranch road running up the ridge line. So the opportunity is it utilizes that existing ranch road, minimizing impacts on the habitat and resources out there. It traverses the ridge line, again, providing great views. The constraints, it overlaps with existing grazing infrastructure. The grades are steep in locations, again, somewhere 18% and higher, which we typically strive for 8% average, kind of 12% max is what we look for. And then the user experience could be diminished from hiking a wide open road rather than a purpose-built trail. Alignment 3, again, new purpose-built trail, so that 4 to 6 foot range. It avoids drainage crossings, which helps control costs and minimizes impacts. It provides for panoramic vistas. The constraints is that it's higher visibility from Highway 1, again, with the switchbacks climbing up that initial hillside from the parking area. It traverses near stock ponds and active pasture, so inevitably it's more interaction with the grazing tenant and the cattle, and inevitably it results in impacts to our trail and interactions with public and cattle. And again, another constraint is that new trail construction is typically more impactful than utilizing existing ranch roads or converting existing road. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and go back to any of the visuals if that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Gretchen. I'll turn to my colleagues first. I have some questions, but I'll start. Eureka.
Great presentation and lots of good recommendations for us. So I assume this is all chaparral, so there's no shade at all. Is that right?
So primarily, I would say, let me go back to the map so I can, a lot of this habitat all the way until you get to about this point is dominated by grassland pasture
Mhm.
and chaparral and coast sage scrub in various locations. So yeah, not a lot of overstory canopy until you get to Libidos Creek. There's a little bit of riparian nudging in where we have to cross minor drainages, but other than that, it is more exposed than something like in Corte Madera with the redwood canopy.
Mhm. Okay, and you mentioned the views from Verde Road and the highway and such. So it, perhaps when we're presenting to the board, it might be helpful to get a couple snapshots of those or
Sure.
something. Yeah,
Yeah, happy to do that.
yeah. And your trail viewer, I guess you can do a little bit of it on Google Map, but was also nice to
Sure.
say that. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. It's seems pretty clear. You've done your homework. Back to you.
Director Siemens, questions?
No, just a comment that I just, there's a lot of work in this. Very well done. So I really don't have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So Brian, yeah, this was a great presentation, and unfortunately with great presentations comes lots of questions. And Director Kishimoto asked a couple of them already. Just those some basics. Dogs?
I believe our intent is to provide multi-use access for the trail alignment. So that would be hiking, equestrian, and mountain bike. And I don't believe dog access is being considered, but I
Okay.
would defer to Gretchen if you'd like to answer that.
While Gretchen's answering that, the only reason I question that is at La Honda, right? Because when we opened that up kind of in a similar way, and then we put in the Grasshopper Loop Trail with dogs, and then and so I was just wondering, do we had something similar in mind?
Sure. At this time, as Brian mentioned, we do feel like it would be appropriate to have hiking, biking, equestrian uses. The existing trails within Purisima do not allow dogs,
Right.
nor does the Cowell Purisima Trail. And so
Right.
to maintain those consistencies here,
Okay.
along with compatibility with the grazing operation.
Got it. Okay, good. Thank you. And just like at La Honda, are there any seasonal closures that are going to be required of this trail because of the cattle?
So I think that's something that we would work through in the next phase of the project. But one area I would think possibly, if we were to implement this loop option here using both connector A and
Yeah.
B, is that we do have a segment of road that leads down to the grazing tenants corrals, which are located
Right.
here. And so potentially when the grazer is bringing their cattle
see.
down slope, we may close that trail, especially if we are able to implement connector B, which would provide an alternative access point to the trail network. So that would be one area I could possibly anticipate a seasonal closure.
Okay, because I was just wondering between 1, 2, and 3, it would seasonal closures impact one or the other more. So my last question is more just trying to understand the scale of this, the miles. And I'm looking at the lower right, and that looks like, Brian, if I were to hike the A and B, just the loop, because I know a lot of our users just like loop trails, especially shorter ones with families and so on. That looks like about a mile. Is that?
It's about 1.5 miles, I think, for the full loop.
Okay.
Maybe close to 2 miles in that range. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And as far as elevation gain and so on, that's not too
it's
bad. Or?
several hundred feet, but
Oh,
not
okay.
on the order of something too difficult. Again, with this existing ranch road, we do have some fairly steep grades
Right.
there. So that is a
Right.
fairly steep hike up that direction.
Okay. Okay, good. And then my second question is, would we consider portions of option 2 so that would allow us to build in more shorter loops? Because if we go with option 1, it's for the most part, once you leave the A and B loop, it's an out and back, right?
Right.
And again, if you could help me with this, once I do the AB loop, then I set out on option 1. That's what, 3 miles? So,
So yeah, basically, if you were to link all the way
Yeah.
over to Irish Ridge, that's about 6 miles. So it is a long,
6 miles, yeah.
yeah, it is a
Wow.
long hike, and that just gets you to our existing trail network. With the intent being that the Purissima to the Sea trail would be approximately 15 miles. So
So that's 6 of the 15. Am I?
6 of the 15, and the rest would rely on the existing trail network.
I see.
within Purissima.
I see. Okay. Because I noticed in the feedback that there were some comments about, gosh, could we have a rest stop or restrooms, whatever, like at the midway point is, and I was wondering, what's the midway point? Is that where your marker is now?
Yeah,
Is that-
I would say, the midway point is somewhere in this area up here. If you're looking at the entirety of the Purissima to the Sea and sort of the final designation using the existing trail network.
Mhm.
There is the Grabtown Gulch trailhead, which is out of this screen here, but provides a shorter opportunity for like a potential through hike or shuttle type of hike or ride or what have you. So yeah, I think if you were to implement some kind of midpoint facilities, it's something we've heard, yeah, as part of our feedback in that process, would be something that would be kind of would have to avoid sensitive habitat, obviously. And it's something we're still considering at this point and really haven't landed on what exactly that would be without committee or board feedback.
Got it. Okay. And then last question is, so I'm all in favor of the kind of the 4 to 6 foot wide rather than the ranch road. I get that completely and support that. But also, though, I kind of wondered a little bit about service access and in case of emergency, how do we get out into some of those areas?
That's a great question. And, even if we don't implement alignment 2 as our preferred route,
Yeah.
the road will still exist there, and we can, incorporate minor improvements to that road to provide for emergency access if that's something that is desirable, because we do have an existing road network. And some of, even this gold segment, there are some segments of road that will be incorporated just based on the constraints on the site. So there will be kind of access points in various locations to provide emergency access that just won't be open to the public. So it'll be, signage and potentially gates, fencing, et cetera, to keep the public from utilizing these other areas that would be available for the rancher and for our maintenance and visitor services staff to
Got it.
provide
Okay.
for emergency access.
Okay, great. So those are my questions. Director Kishimoto?
Some more of those, those are great questions. So that this does kind of bring up in my mind the possibility of, if we have the funding for it, of doing both 1 and 3 for a larger loop. So that would be like a 4 or 5 mile loop, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I'll let Gretchen maybe comment on that, because we do have some guiding documents that, for our uses on these lands.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I do want to just highlight that the South Cal property where those western portions of this connector trail are located do have some restrictions in terms of the amount of trails that can be located on that property within the conservation easement. So that short loop of A and B plus alignment 1 are within that acceptable length of trail, but wouldn't be feasible to implement 1 and 3.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, could you make sure to include a little information about that easement language in the
Absolutely.
report? Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, Director Siemens, looks like you have your hand up. Questions?
Oh, well, yes, the discussion raised a question in my mind about the upper loop on alignment 2. Is that existing ranch road again?
Yeah, so I'll highlight the existing ranch road runs up along here, shown in red, and then drops back down and links in with what's shown in gold here, and then runs here. And then some of this will be new trail construction down by Labidos Creek, and some legacy road into trail along the Labidos Creek riparian edge.
Okay, on the upper red loop, is that also a grazing area?
This is, yeah, grazing all throughout. There's a lot of pasture land all along this ridge line, and we basically, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have two tenants on, one on South Cowell here, and then we also have a tenant on our Blue Brush property in this area over here. So we have two tenants that graze this kind of segment of Parisima Creek.
Okay, and then just the last question around the loop AB. Is there what grazing operation is around that? Is there any grazing right in that vicinity?
Yes, there is grazing. So again, this is part of, you can see the South Cowell property kind of outlined in this light gold color here. And so
Okay,
this is a portion of grazed area with our South Cowell grazing tenant. And so additionally, some consideration is, if we were to implement this as a public loop, specifically is that we would relocate some of the grazing infrastructure to promote watering of cattle away from the trail, whereas right now it's right along that existing ranch road. So we would make some improvements for the grazing tenant to better separate the public from the grazing tenant's operation.
okay. What's going on in my head, the reason the question is because I'm thinking of dog access, and I'm not now, but in the future, if that loop was there, that could potentially be a dogs on leash loop just in that one area. And I certainly don't want to open up Parisima to dogs, but and the rest of the upper area. But I thought, something closer to the parking where somebody could go walk their dog on a short loop might be appropriate. And I know there's some consideration of dogs and with cattle, but I think we need to lean very heavily on the experience from East Bay regional parks when we start talking about the dog access, whether yes or no, and how this worked out for them, because they seem to have the dogs allowed in the areas where they have grazing, and what problems that creates or has created, I don't know at this point, but we should certainly learn from them. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Director. Simon.
Great. Sorry, I just have it works this way, right? When people ask questions, it makes you think of, first, I just want to reinforce what Director Kishimoto said. I think having more pictures for the board would be great because you refer to that. So it'd be great if we could have some pictures in that area. And then the other is I found that one map, kind of the realistic map, was really helpful because what I'm a little bit concerned about is just the grades and gradients, that we have, and that's really tough to tell from here.
Sure.
And I know that we have trail building guidelines and so on that we don't, and which I'm completely confident in. But if there was some sense of the differences, because I think you commented several times that like version 2 or trail 2 or trail 3 was more steep than the others. Right. I don't know. Is there a way that we can get a sense from that, and our public can get a sense from that?
Yeah, and again, at least with our stakeholder engagement, we've used that Trail Viewer application as a way to showcase that. And we also have worked with our GIS team to put together trail profiles that kind of show the differences. But I think one of the limitations with those is we rely on existing LiDAR data, and then we overlay data we've collected in the field that ultimately is manipulated in the desktop level. And so it doesn't always communicate sort of the actual situation on the ground, but the Trail Viewer that we've developed does provide something like that. And I don't know if it's something we're going to do here, but it's something we could maybe look at later in the discussion if that's warranted, because it's an online application and something we've used in previous engagement meetings.
Okay. I think we're set to allow you to keep going.
Great. All right. Well, I'll turn it over to Mark Randy.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Brandy. I am a landscape architect and restoration ecologist with SWCA Environmental Consultants. We're the consultant team who is hired by the district to support the planning process of both the trails and then as well as the next segment of the project, which we'll be talking about today, which is the potential parking areas located on the western end of these trail alignments. I'll just advance a few slides here. So to begin, just as a refresher, in terms of the planning process that we have followed for the potential parking areas on the site. As Gretchen mentioned earlier, we've conducted an extensive amount of site analysis and background resource studies for the potential parking areas. And shown here on the screen, on the right side of the screen, are a few additional site photos for your reference, with some of the key potential parking areas being located, again, just to the north of the intersection of Verde Road and Highway 1, several hundred feet, maybe less than a quarter mile north of that intersection. And the upper picture here is the main area under consideration, which is in between Highway 1 and Verde Road. So you can get a sense here of the different types of assessments and studies that we did during the site analysis process, which included biological resource assessments. We also did a riparian setback analysis because in the lower picture on the screen, you can see there is a minor unnamed drainage that flows through the potential parking areas on either side of Verde Road. So we did a riparian setback analysis that compared the need for potential setbacks and locating essentially all of our infrastructure away from that drainage according to the guidelines that are presented in both the LCP and the district's coastal service plan documents. So we've incorporated that into the planning process. We also did several other resource studies, cultural resource studies. We evaluated the existing culverts for their drainage capacity on the site, conducted a topographic survey and a traffic study. And then finally, we also relied heavily on and were directly informed by the multimodal access study, which was presented to the PNR in August. So that has directly factored into the designs that you'll see later on in the presentation. We then took and translated all of that background information and all of those different site analysis documents were then synthesized into an opportunities and constraints analysis document for the project. Essentially what we did was we tried to distill all of the technical information from those documents into a single document for reference as we move forward with the planning process and the feasibility study phase of the project, and then in subsequent phases of the project as well. So essentially what we did here was we boiled down all of the different opportunities and constraints that we identified into 4 different categories on the site, which included the physical attributes of the site, cultural attributes, biological attributes, and key safety attributes of the site. And some of the key considerations, we appreciate that these figures are relatively small, but some of the key considerations that came out of this process in terms of the physical site, figure 1 and the physical site, some of the key considerations were an obvious need to be cognizant of and to plan for the protection of scenic resources along the Highway 1 corridor, being a scenic corridor, obviously. So the need for potential site screening of any improvements that we propose here. What's convenient and what you'll see in the designs when we show them is that these sites are largely hidden from view along the Highway 1 corridor. And with some additional screening enhancements, we believe that we can be successful there. In terms of cultural attributes, there were no sensitive cultural historic resources identified within the footprint of our planning area and where we would propose parking improvements. However, we did obviously want to be very cognizant and sensitive to adjacent farmlands and grazing operations, as Brian alluded to in talking about the trail as well. We wanted to be cognizant there for the potential parking area. District staff did analyze farmlands in the area and did determine that the potential parking areas that we'll show momentarily are not located on any prime agricultural lands, unique farmlands, or farmlands of statewide importance as defined by San Mateo County's LCP and by the California Resource Agency. So before we share momentarily our design alternatives for the potential parking area, we just wanted to frame up and give some context of some of the similarities, key similarities, and some of the key differences that you'll see in the 3 different design alternatives that we'll present today. So some of the key similarities are the incorporation of transportation demand management strategies that were identified by the multimodal access study. You'll see those incorporated throughout all 3 design alternatives. Each of the design alternatives also attempts to work as much as possible with the existing topography of the site in recognition of the fact that earthwork ends up being one of the key drivers of cost of implementing a project. So trying to be cognizant of and working with the existing landforms to the maximum extent possible. Other similarities woven throughout include accessible destinations right within the trailhead and parking area woven into the designs. The need to set back all of the designs as far as we could from Highway 1 and the scenic corridor. Attempting to minimize user conflicts within the parking and trailhead areas to the maximum extent possible, minimizing existing impacts to existing resources, and avoiding the grazing infrastructure adjacent to the site as much as possible. So that's some context on some of the things that you'll see throughout all 3 of the designs, and then just some key differences to be aware of when we review the designs are obviously the size, just the physical footprint of the 3 different alternatives does vary. The configuration of the entry road will vary. The location of the trailhead in relation to the parking areas varies, as does the equestrian parking location and the use of the portion of the site that's to the east of Verde Road. So with that, we'll finally get to share and show the 3 different alternatives that we've come up with for the potential parking area and trailhead. So this is alternative A, and again, for orientation, we are just north of the intersection of Highway 1 and Verde Road. And you can see that this alternative is entirely located to the west of Verde Road. The pointer's still on here. Whoops. Excuse me. Pardon me. It's not going back for me on. There we go. Oh, no. There we go. All right. So Verde Road being located to the east of this proposed design alternative, all of these improvements being between Highway 1 and Verde Road. So this alternative A, does have the smallest of the 3 project footprints. It incorporates approximately 40 general parking spaces, which are located out here on the western perimeter of the design. It also incorporates up to 20 priority parking spaces within the core area of the project footprint, which could be utilized for carpool spaces, electric vehicle spaces, and then ADA parking spaces as well. Each of the designs, as I said, does also incorporate the transportation demand management strategies that were identified by the multimodal access study, which are called out here in red. We'll talk about those in a little bit more detail on one of the subsequent alternatives. And again, you can see here, just to point out some of those similarities that I talked about on the previous slide and in the table. You can see that the existing landform out here, these are existing contour lines of the site, and Verde Road and the potential entry location is located higher than the Highway 1 corridor. So the site is gently sloping down from Verde Road to Highway 1. And so this layout of these potential parking stalls tries to follow along those contours to the maximum extent possible, again, to minimize that grading and drainage. Some of the differences between this alternative design and the alternatives B and C, which you'll see subsequently, are that the equestrian parking is located, centrally located within the project footprint and allows for a pull-through design where equestrian vehicles could navigate through the parking lot, pull into their parking spaces, and then pull through directly without having to back up in the design. Other differences are the location of the access road. You'll note compared to the other two designs is that here we have the access road located on the northern edge of the potential parking area, with the trailhead being located to the south. And again, another key difference with the next alternative that I'll show is that we're not proposing in this alternative any design to the east of Verde Road. All right, so here we now have alternative B, which you can start to see a key difference being utilization of both sides, east and west of Verde Road. This alternative B, has the intermediate size project footprint between alternatives A and C. It still incorporates approximately 40 general parking spaces, but the number of priority parking spaces that could be accommodated increases to approximately 35 spaces. And the main way that that was accomplished is by the consideration of potentially locating equestrian parking to the east of Verde Road, as opposed to trying to incorporate it on the western side of the road. So that's one of the key differences there. I will point out, though, that there were obvious spatial limitations associated with the area to the east of Verde Road, as you can see represented here, and that there are limitations in terms of the usability of that side of the road, in terms of trying to think about, for example, trying to get equestrian vehicles with their trailers in and out of there. We did not find a solution where we would be able to have a full turnaround on that side of the site, on that side of the road. And so the configuration that you're seeing here is like a hammerhead, turn in, back out, and leave the site configuration, which is obviously not ideal from the perspective of an equestrian user or anyone who's trying to enter and exit that portion of the site. A few other key differences here that we'll highlight is that in addition to the equestrian parking on the eastern side of the road, that if we were to contemplate any development on that side of the road, then we would potentially have the need for additional restroom facilities and a smaller trailhead and or educational area on that side of the site as well. But all trying to take into account and to minimize any potential impacts with the existing corral infrastructure on that side of the road. And then finally, we have alternative C for the site, which is, as you can visually tell from the three graphics, the largest of the three project footprints, in that we have space for approximately 70 general parking spaces included here, as well as those 35 priority parking spaces. So in total, over 100 parking spaces, as well as increasing the number of equestrian parking spaces potentially available to up to 6 potential vehicles located on the perimeter of the site here. That being another key difference of alternative C to the previous two alternatives is the idea of locating the equestrian parking on the outermost perimeter of the site, again, in an effort to try to minimize those potential interaction of passenger vehicles with equestrian vehicles entering and exiting the site, as well as pedestrians navigating the site. One other similarity that's, again, woven through all of the different design alternatives that I wanted to make sure to point out is the incorporation of a off-pavement network of pathways woven through the potential parking areas in an effort to try to minimize the amount of time that site users have to be walking behind parked vehicles. You know, that's always an issue for users of a trailhead facility like this. And so trying to have direct access immediately adjacent to any given parking spot to be able to navigate your way through the parking area and get out to the trailhead facility. And again, with alternatives B and C, you'll note a difference of the configuration of the entry road as well. In that in alternatives B and C, the entry road configuration is to the south of the potential trailhead facilities. And in that way, that helps to separate that use. And if you're enjoying your time at the trailhead, then you don't then have to cross through different access roads in order to get onto the trail network. Finally, on this final slide here, we just wanted to call out again in a bit more detail the ways that we have woven the recommendations, some of the key recommendations from the multimodal access study into the design alternatives. In this case, we're highlighting them on alternative C. We did incorporate them on alternatives A and B as well. But just in terms of some of those key aspects of the design that were incorporated, up here at the entry to the site, we did take the opportunity to include a shuttle drop-off and bus shelter, which could potentially be linked to different areas around the perimeter of the preserve to facilitate, among other things, a one-way hike experience where someone could park here, walk up to another destination, and then catch a ride back to their car as opposed to having to do the full out and back in a given day. So we incorporated shuttle drop-off areas. We incorporated bike parking, ample room for bike parking in the trailhead itself. Again, Verde Road has been identified as a potential bike route in the County of San Mateo's active transportation plan. So anticipating that we could get a decent amount of bike traffic who is attempting to visit the site. Other multimodal strategies would include, again, the priority parking area being located centrally to the site for carpools, electric vehicles, and ADA parking. And the fact that the equestrian parking, which is located here on the perimeter, that could also function as a bit of flexible space as well when not being used by equestrians. For example, the potential for those spaces to be used during the weekday for school buses to be able to park and having dropped off local school children. Also, it just could be flexible space that could be used for a variety of other purposes as needed. Finally, we also wanted to highlight in this particular case that we did identify a potential area where we could allow for overflow parking beyond the limits of the formal infrastructure that would be installed on the site. So that could potentially allow for overflow if there was a special event, or if we were just finding that, you know, on weekends, there's a need for greater parking capacity, that we could potentially allow for overflow parking beyond the limits of the main parking area. In addition, that overflow parking area could one day be hypothetically formalized into formal parking as needed based upon the actual use and demand of the trailhead facility. So for all those reasons that we just identified, alternative C here, as Gretchen alluded to, has really emerged as the preferred alternative design for the potential parking areas. And again, that's based a lot on the capacity, the overall capacity of the facility as shown here on alternative C, which was, we heard, as Tyler will describe in a little more detail next, we did hear consistently from the public a desire for that greater parking capacity. Seemed to be consistent feedback that we received throughout the planning process. Again, this alternative also helps to kind of maximize those multimodal elements into the design process, and the ability to have some flexibility in terms of overflow parking or expansion in the future also would potentially provide the district with greater flexibility in the future as well. So with that, I believe that's the end of my presentation. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the potential parking area design.
All right, thank you, Mark. I'll go to my colleagues. Director Siemens?
Was there additional screening being proposed on the Highway 1 side of the property or the potential parking?
Thank you. Great question. Yes. So the existing topography of the site, there is an embankment where Highway 1 is actually lower than the core potential parking area, and it's also heavily vegetated along that stretch of Highway 1. It does not appear that additional screening would be necessary along that frontage of Highway 1. However, if you are driving south along Highway 1, passing by the potential parking area, there is an existing, and I can actually go back and share briefly, along this northern edge of the potential parking area, there's an existing windrow of, I believe, cypress trees, Monterey cypress trees, I believe, that does provide screening of the majority of this area. It does appear that there could be a little bit of infill of that existing vegetation that might help to complete the full screening of all of these infrastructure improvements. And so, again, a point of emphasis would be, even though this project footprint is large, the vast majority, if not all, of this infrastructure would be hidden from view along Highway 1.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Kishimoto.
Thank you. Yeah, these are very exciting. So one question is, can you remind me when we did the county parking count for the Prisma Creek, especially the lower area, what were some maximum numbers we were finding?
Yeah, and maybe I'll turn that to Gretchen in terms of those original numbers.
Thank you. I may need to provide those details as a follow-up, unless perhaps Tyler, who I know is on virtually, may be able to provide that information. However, we do know certainly that on weekends and even weekdays at the lower lot, that the lot is generally always at capacity, and the roadway, the available roadway parking is often at full capacity as well. And I believe that it is something about more than 50 vehicle spaces have been removed from the ability to have parking along the roadway with the no parking signs. So right there, we already have decreased parking at the lower Purisima lot, in addition to wanting to address that, this new trailhead and trail opportunity as well.
I'm trying to remember those numbers too. I remember like 200 or something. Yeah, it's, including before we took away those spaces. It's so. So although I don't like to see huge parking lots, I think there's going to be the demand for it. One thing I like about alternative B is splitting it a little bit, just so that you don't get that the giant parking lot effect. But I know we'll do a nice job of breaking it up with landscaping. Let me see. I don't know if I have anything. Oh well, a very minor thing occurred to me, because there's all these bicyclists going to be coming by. Is I assume the restrooms are. Is there going to be water there? So like water fountains and such, or is that are they?
As you know, typically we don't provide potable water at these locations or flush toilets, and we would anticipate having the same infrastructure here that we typically do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thanks for these good questions. Just a few more. I was having trouble comparing, especially between A and C, the difference in footprint. So is there a way either in numbers or graphically we could do that? Because I think the rest of the board would be interested in that as well. And it's kind of goes where Director Kishimoto is. It seems like 40, 40, 70. Oh my gosh, that's quite a jump. And I get it that we might need that, but I don't get a sense of, so how much bigger is that compared to between the two? Is there a way to do that?
Sure, we would certainly be happy to provide that information in terms of the acreage. I think that's a great addition to the information that we can provide here. I believe that the overall site between Highway 1 and Verde Road, correct me if I'm wrong, Gretchen, but I believe the overall site is about 5 acres in terms of available space.
In terms of available space. I
Right,
believe the
but not-
parcel itself
right.
is around 10.
Right. Yeah, so the available space that we're talking about here, if I kind of just circle on the plan here, that available space is approximately 5 acres, but the footprint that we would be proposing to develop within any of these given alternatives would be less than that. So it may be on the order of more, several acres, but we could quantify that for you certainly, and provide that to you as well.
Okay, yeah, great. That'd be helpful. The second thing is you kind of opened up with this as far as prime ag. So this is not agricultural land now. Could you go into that a little more detail about?
Correct. So there's two sources that identify and categorize prime agricultural soils in the state, and that can be at the county level with the local coastal program, San Mateo County, and then the California Resource Agency that does mapping as well. And so district staff and the consultant team evaluated the different maps that were available that identify, and again, there's 3 different kind of categories of sensitive agricultural lands. There's the prime agricultural land designation, there's then unique farmlands, and then there's farmlands of statewide importance. And so what we did find is that when you look at those mappings of those different categories of agricultural lands, that within the footprint that we're talking about here for the potential parking areas on both this side, the west side of Verde Road, and on the east side, that none of those, this footprint does not overlap with any of those potential prime areas. They were generally located within the vicinity of the project. They're located further north, closer to Carissima Creek Road, is where the majority of the prime farmlands were designated, as well as, I believe, some lands to the west of Highway 1, I believe as well.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Could you go back to alternative B?
Sure.
There's
Still C, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I'm actually coming, I think, a little different than Director Kishimoto on this, is thinking rather than split it between 2, I'm thinking I'd like to consolidate it into 1, but I can see pros and cons to that. But one of the things that I see in this one, there's a corral and there's an agricultural education area and so on that I didn't see in the other alternatives. So are we, should we be considering that as well in our decision?
Correct. So thank you for pointing that out. And so in this configuration where we were contemplating some minimal amount of potential development on the eastern side of Verde Road, conceptually our thinking went along the lines of, well, if we're going to potentially have, members of the public there, could you potentially enhance that experience by having an agricultural type education experience, adjacent to the existing corrals and infrastructure of the site. I will say though, they're off the scale of these drawings. But what you can see in alternatives A and also in all 3 alternatives also incorporate similar types of features on the west side of Verde Road. So you can see this notation here to a nature education area where we were imagining that, again, this is the riparian drainage that flows adjacent to the site. So we were imagining that you could have a small pathway that gets out to a nature and or agricultural education area in this vicinity as well. And then also taking advantage of some of the views of the coast that are available just without even having to climb up into the foothills. There are existing views out to the coast from this potential trailhead area as well. So we had imagined that, you could have a small pathway that leads out to a coastal overlook as well. We do have, and I believe they're in the packet for the meeting, full-scale plans that zoom out a little bit further than this and would show you the context and the configuration that we were imagining for those features.
And I just wanted to highlight as well that that area shown in alternative B, those corrals are existing at that site. And that is the location that the current grazing tenant uses for accessing that site. So even with these very minimal improvements, there would definitely be, space constraints and an impact on the grazing tenant with these improvements in this area.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, thanks.
One more question.
Sure.
So there's no lighting planned for at all for this area, is that right?
No lighting.
Thank you.
Okay, not seeing anything. Maybe just one other follow-up question then, and you were kind of alluding to this when we're talking about size. As far as our parking infrastructure, if you will, and the coast, this is it. I mean, we don't have really any other places for lots to locate. So to really solve our Parisima Creek Redwoods issue and then the added trails here, this is going to have to do double duty, right? So this would argue for, I guess, the increased size.
You're right that this is this is a location with potential to address the parking challenges on the coast, the coastal access for Parisima.
Right. And remind me, how far is it mileage from here to the lower Parisima Creek Redwoods parking lot? That is not a hikeable, right? I mean, that's
2.5 miles, more than 2 miles, perhaps.
yeah. Okay. So for this to offload that, if you will, people are either going to have to drive here and ride their bikes, or hopefully potentially a shuttle is what is how that would solve. Because otherwise you would have to hike the 6 miles or plus that we talked about before.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Director Siemens, you have your hand up?
Yes. I noticed that you've got carpool and EV potential. So I'm gathering that you're planning on having the electric charger infrastructure located in any of these lots. Is that correct?
That is certainly a use that we will be evaluating throughout the design development process.
Is there power close by? You probably need a 12 kV or something lines.
Yeah, there's existing power running along Verde Road that I think can potentially be tapped to power the site as needed. And I think that a lot of those considerations, as Gretchen alluded to, we're obviously just in this initial planning and feasibility phase of the project, and that those would certainly be evaluated and considered in greater detail in subsequent phases, the detailed design phase of the project.
Okay, well, and while I'm on the subject, just because I think I'd like to make a couple comments on design, even though it may be early, but I probably won't be here later for when you get into more detail. But two considerations. One is provide the wiring, at least the conduit to all the parking areas available for all the parking group areas rather than just one small one for electric. Even though we don't put in all the infrastructure initially, we need to have the conduit in place for future, because I can see where all of a sudden you got time goes by and you've got 70% of the cars in there are electric or more. So I think we need to make sure we put the at least the plumbing in so we could run wires in when we need to. And the second, of course, is the permeable surface, similar to what we put up at Mount Umunhum, I think is gonna, otherwise I can see some severe drainage issues for a heavy storm like we had up at Corte Madera, that when we put the lot in, everything ran off into the neighbor's property. And I think we need to make sure we use that same kind of construction for the parking, the permeable surface. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll just say that's a great suggestion to evaluate potential for permeable paving. One thing I failed to point out on these alternative designs would be that we also did evaluate that if it were to be traditional pavement utilized within the parking areas, we have identified some potential locations for stormwater basins where the runoff from the parking areas could be directed and then treated, in a natural constructed wetland environment prior to flowing off into any drainage network in the area.
Oh, I just think that given the problem we had at Corte Madera, it's sometimes those drainage things look great until you get a major storm, and then all of a sudden they don't work so great anymore. So had we had a permeable surface at Corte Madera, we probably would never had the problem up there.
Thank you. We appreciate that suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, I think you've answered all of our questions. So what's next?
All right, very good. I'll just advance a few slides here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, who will be talking about the public engagement process for the project. Take it away, Tyler.
Great. Thank you, Mark. This is Tyler Smith, Planner 2 here at MidPenn. The goals accomplished through the project's engagement efforts were to provide information on the project and to receive public feedback on design alternatives to bring back to the committee or board. The Prisma to the Sea project team facilitated and participated in 19 different engagement activities, including 15 district-wide community meetings and events, of which 3 were open house public meetings held in December 2021 and summer 2022. There were 4 pop-up events, including farmers markets and a street market. The project team translated project documentation and outreach materials into Spanish and hosted an interactive hike and site tour with a Spanish-speaking hiking group with live interpretation. Other groups engaged were neighbors, trail users, the ag community, and in particular, the grazing tenant on the property. Additional engagement efforts included 2 agency partner meetings and 2 neighborhood meetings with the Lower Prisma neighbors and the Kings Mountain Association. In coordination with the Prisma Multimodal Project team, we released a visitor survey soliciting feedback on desired trail experience, parking lot size preference, configuration, amenities, parking needs, proposed TDMs, and the visitor's likelihood of using them. And if you could advance to the next slide, please. The project team received a wide range of feedback. There was overall support for public access with interest in a parking area design that maximizes parking area capacity. There was support for incorporating multimodal strategies into the design of the parking area. We heard that the parking area design needs to consider a circulation pattern and pedestrian crossing that reduces user conflicts. There was also interest in alternative crossing designs on Highway 1, including wildlife crossings. Throughout the project, there were neighbor concerns related to impacts to congestion and the potential for trespassing on a private property from the proposed trail alignment. There was also support for multiple and single trail uses. Due to the length of the proposed alignment, there was interest in mid-trail facilities for the general public and equestrians, including a backpack camp. People were really interested in the idea of a loop trail experience. We received comments that the project avoided sensitive habitats and prime agricultural land and to be compatible with the existing grazing operation. Equity was another theme in the comments received, with interest in a shuttle program and support for signage, mapping, and online information to be available in both English and Spanish. Other comments received were regionally focused, that the project be compatible with the San Mateo local coastal program, and the fact that the proposed Verde Road parking area is proximate to nearby coastal parking areas and may be impacted by overflow parking. I will now pass it along to Gretchen, who will go over the project's next steps.
Thanks, Tyler. So to wrap up here are the next steps. If the Planning and Natural Resources Committee confirms the general manager's recommendations, staff will finalize the remaining tasks associated with the feasibility study, including technical studies of the post-trail easement and the development of concept plans for roadway crossings and connector trails, permitting analysis of the trails and parking area, and development of preliminary parking area cost estimates. Next, staff would return to the board in the spring of 2023 to present this additional information and the recommended trail alignment and conceptual parking area design for the board's consideration. If the board confirms the preferred option, this would be used as the project description to initiate the environmental review process. So shown here, highlighted in yellow, are those next steps. The board meeting anticipated for next spring and the initiation of the environmental review process next fiscal year. So here again are the general manager's recommendations, and the project team is happy to answer additional questions.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen. And I think, yeah, let's do that. Let's see if there's any additional questions on what you just presented and what Tyler presented. And then I'd love to get to open to the public, and then we can come back to this. So any questions on just these last few slides from my colleagues? Yurika, you're okay? Pete, did you have anything?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, I'm good for now. I guess my question is more of a comment, so I'll wait for that. So why don't we, thank you. Why don't we head for public comment? So Jen?
Chair Riffle, we have not received any public comments from members of the public to provide oral comment. I do see that a hand is raised. Hold on just a second.
Looks like Mike B.
Yes.
I wonder if that's Mike.
So we do ask, give me a moment and I'll share my screen.
Okay.
So we do ask that members of the public provide or submit a public comment form using the website that is listed at the top of the screen. We do not take comments from hands being raised. If you do submit a written comment following the close of the public comment period during this meeting, all of those comments are provided to our committee members and also to staff who are working on the project. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And maybe while just I remembered my question. And so why don't I go to that, and then we can come back to if we have any questions or comments from the public. Gretchen, could you go back to the previous slide where we had somewhat of a timeline? And I think the many things that I'll remember from Director Siemens after he steps off, but one of them will be something he said recently of, we do great work, but let's do it faster. And so is that timeline? Because I was just wanting to get staff's thoughts about the next couple phases. And I noticed the timing stops at 2022. Uh-oh, did I break it?
We're getting there.
Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah, really good point and good questions. Generally during the feasibility study,
Right.
there are kind of so many unknowns that putting those dates out there is difficult. So I think
Right.
we could definitely take a much closer look at this between now and the board meeting and try to come up with some firmer timelines. As part of the environmental review for this project, because there are so many other projects going on within
Right.
Carissima at the same time, some of those will be looked at holistically in the environmental review.
Right.
So we do anticipate that environmental review process
Right.
would take more than 1 year's time, certainly. And although we have all of these phases as distinct phases there certainly is some overlap of the phases as well, that while we are conducting the environmental review, we would also be furthering the design development as necessary to
Right.
conduct the environmental review.
Right.
So with that, we can certainly continue to develop what we feel like is a reasonable schedule
Okay.
moving forward.
So kind of then a follow on to that, Gretchen, is we're basically talking about two different projects here, though, in a way, right? I mean, we've got the trails to put in, but then we've got the parking lot. The parking lot, though, is doing kind of double duty. It's not only for the trails we're going to put in here, but also for what we just talked about, the fact that we were so underparked on the coast. I guess what I would almost put priority, and gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, is to say, let's get that parking lot done sooner than later, while we're doing the trails, but one versus the other. I don't know if it comes down to, do we do one sooner than the other, or we do them together? Do you see what I'm saying? Is we really need to keep moving, but definitely on that parking area.
Yeah, and my thought on that would that they would certainly be running concurrently
Yeah.
because they are very different projects.
Right.
And then
Okay.
aside from the parking and then the connecting trail within the preserve,
Yeah.
there's also that thought about the connector trails from
Right.
the parking
True.
area
Right.
west.
Yeah.
And that could
Yeah.
also have a different timeline as well,
I
as
see.
it's outside of district plan.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. All right. So we did Jen, did we get any public?
Chair Riffle, we did get one written public comment, so that will be provided to members of the committee and also to staff, but no
Okay.
request for oral comment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we will close public comment on this, and we'll bring it back now to the committee for either further questions or comments. So looks like you have your hand up. So we'll go with Director Kishimoto.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so well, given the information that we've been given, and it was a lot of work that went into this, I mean, I could definitely see the reasons for the staff recommendations so that's trail alignment 1 and connectors A and B and alternative C for parking. So yeah, I mean, I would support going in that general direction. My just my questions going forward would be, I would, it would be great. It's like we're not the real property committee, but it would be great to get some field visits, at least between now and the board report, and just opportunity for, possibly even, the rest of the board too, to go out there and see what the both the parking lot area and to those board members who are interested, the trail alignment. And then the other thought I had was, that we will probably be attracting some more traffic onto Verde. And, for people who want to, I mean, I don't know if we haven't, since it has more to do with the multimodal study, we haven't made that decision to close that small parking lot in the lower lot. But some kind, either some kind of a, I don't know if we need some kind of a traffic calming or safety issue for people who want to park in the big parking lot and maybe bike up to that other area. And so we don't want to cause problems by, just encouraging a lot of speeding on Verde Road and Prisma and such too. So some consideration to that as we talk about our multimodal. So yeah, so it would be to request opportunities for some field visits, and maybe one question is whether it needs to come back to PNR, but yeah, I don't think so, especially if there's a alignment on us, on our recommendations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Siemens.
Yeah, probably a couple comments. I absolutely support recommendation by staff. I think the one time I was over there on and more recently on a weekend looking at the parking along that road to the entrance to the lower lot. I quit counting cars at over 100, and I still we haven't still reached the entrance yet. And so the option C is absolutely going to be needed. I think we're going to need a shuttle. I'm thinking the lower lot at Purisima has such a low capacity that it should probably be limited to maybe handicapped access by permit or reservation, so that we don't impact that. And then put signs at the beginning of the road where you turn off Highway 1 that says parking lot, no parking, parking lots closed, and then point people down to this new lot. The trail alignment, I think, is well done. I think we absolutely need to spend the extra money to build a purpose-built trails. I've always kind of felt over the years that using ranch roads has always been a bit of a stopgap, where okay to get people on the land, but eventually you need to get rid of them and bypass them. And I know one major example is Sierra Azul. But in any case, I think the plan here is well thought out. And the other reason, of course, is because the steepness. And our standard trail design recommendation is no more than 10%. And so anytime we have situations where we have potential trails that start exceeding that drastically, we need to think about, let's not even consider this anymore. It's kind of like, it seems like we're wasting our time. We need to think about, purpose-built trails in general, and not kind of by accident. And so I think the staff's done a great job with this one. Insofar as the schedule, I support Director Riffle big time. I looked at the timeline, and it seemed to me, if you take the little purple arrow that talked about design, instead of putting it serially on the chart, it should be like right underneath it on the same timeline as the environmental review. There's no reason you can't have the design going on at the same time. We've done enough parking lots, so we already know what's going to be in the EIR already. So it's not a big black magic to go ahead and do the design in parallel. And this is all, I think Larry Haas and I both have the same kind of thoughts about a lot of these things, where we just seem to take forever to think about things. And of course, perfect is the enemy of progress. And you never can get it perfect. Look how much time we spent on Corte Madera. We ended up having to redo that anyway. So you can always going to make mistakes. Let's just take our lumps and get the job done as quick as we can. And getting that parking lot in is even more so than the trail, frankly, to accommodate our lower Purisima problem. I think that should really have priority. So anyway, great job on the work so far. And I'm very supportive and enthusiastic about this whole project. The only fly in the ointment I noticed in the staff report was on this particular measure AA thing. It looks like we're about 6 million in the hole. And I gather that there are some plans to figure out where to cough up the rest of the money. But be that as it may, this is a great plan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Siemens. And actually, I'm going to start with your last question or comment, because I had the same one. And I'm not sure who to look for at staff, but how do we manage the fact that we are, this is one project in Measure AA where we are really exceeding our budget. Not that it's going to change how I vote today, but or maybe we should be ready when we bring this to the board.
Well, Good afternoon. This is Stefan Jaskelak, CFO.
Yeah.
It's a good question, and we've tossed it around a little bit, and we have a draft policy that we're looking at, because to reallocate funding in Measure AA from portfolio to portfolio, it will require bond oversight committee to opine on that, not necessarily to approve it, but just to opine on that, and then move forward to a 2/3 majority vote by the board.
Right.
To reallocate within Measure AA. And the draft calls for ABC to actually be the first stop before we go to BOC, just to make sure that we're in sync with what the board is thinking as far as that goes, which portfolio to take it from, close it, or to move it to. But we're putting the finishing touches on that. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is, of course, we're always leveraging grants as much as we can. It doesn't mean every project is applicable for grant funding, but wherever we can, we do. And let's see, so that's number 2. Number 3 is we do have some interest income from bond proceeds while they're waiting to be spent. Right? We issue the bonds, and then the funds sit there while we spend them down over the next couple of years. So that's another potential source of funding. Not 6 million, but it does help. And then we also have general fund reserves that we're building up for future capital projects. So long story short, there's a quilt patch of options available, but it really all depends on, I guess, on the timing, on the project, on the amount, on the board's appetite, etc., as to where funding would or could or should come from.
Okay. Thank you, Stefan. So yeah, this may be our case study about, because we're going to probably have this more than just this time where we have this situation. So I like your recommendation going forward. Okay, with that, I too am going to be supportive of staff's recommendation here, but with maybe some minor tweaks, or at least some comments. First of all, great presentation, great analysis. I really like the work that you all have done on this. I agree that trail alignment one seems best to me. The only thing that I would like staff to consider, though, as we go forward is, can we put some kind of loop or smaller loops in there to give people more of an option of just more than the out and back, and still be within the easement and so on. So I don't think that needs to change the recommendation. That's just something that I would like staff just to think about as we go forward. And as far as the parking lot design, I think to me, alternative C is clearly the one that we need to go with. And I really like the idea of either more pictures or at least a visit out to that area, just so to make sure that we have a sense that we can represent, at least the committee can represent to the board of what we're considering. Let's see. Oh, and then last thing is, having learned a lot from the La Honda Creek Public Access Working Group, I'm getting a little bit of a deja vu, because remember we were talking about a 70 lot parking area. I'm looking at you, Gretchen, but I don't think you were involved in that at the Red Barn. And okay, and as you know, that kind of blew up on us, and maybe for the right reasons, but I just would like to somehow avoid, it's almost the easy part is for us to propose this, but then when we start getting down to this is what we're going to build, all of a sudden, sometimes we get some pretty major pushback. So if anything, what have we learned from that? And I kind of go back to what Tyler said about public engagement, is maybe we need to kind of keep our public engagement going through the design process to bring the public more along with us, so that we don't kind of have that pretty major pushback that we had at La Honda Creek. So I don't know, comment.
And I will just add a few points there. We have done a tremendous amount of public engagement from day one with this project before we even had ideas for the public to react to. We
Right.
were already trying to meet with them just so that they knew this project was ongoing and we were going to start reaching out to them. So that has really been, I would say, one of the most significant tasks as part of this feasibility study. And, you know, we certainly anticipate keeping that engagement going through all of these next phases as well. So it really is a core part of the project. And we hope that that is successful to allow us to avoid that mishap.
Got it. Great. Okay. Thanks. So those are all the comments that I have. Any other comments, Director Kishimoto?
Well, I'm happy to make the motion to move forward. Well, I guess as PNR, I guess would be to make to adopt the general manager's recommendation on number 2. It would be to accept the recommended trail element 1 and connectors A and B and the conceptual parking area design alternative C, and forward this recommendation to the board of directors.
I'll second.
All right, great. We have a motion and we have a second. If there's no other comments.
Yeah, just a very minor point, just on your last comment about outreach, and I'm just looking at that neighborhood on Google Maps, and there are some neighbors kind of just where Verde runs into one, and I imagine you've already reached out to them.
Yeah, we have been, our outreach for this has been really widespread and our notifications have been very widespread.
Yes, okay, okay, good. All right.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. So we may have a roll call vote, please.
Director Siemens,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
Director Ripple,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Thank you all. Really, really excellent job. And I'm so happy to see this going forward. That, I think, brings us to the end of our agenda. So this meeting is adjourned.
Say bye.
Bye, Pete.